Dear God, there's a child in that trash bin. Oh my God, she's barely breathing. The words tore out of Elena Vasquez before she could stop them. It was pouring rain, a freezing storm that turned the Chicago night into a gray blur. Elena had just lifted the heavy metal lid of the dumpster behind the kitchen when she saw her. There she was, Lily Corsetti, 3 years old but small for her age, curled up among black garbage bags and rotting food, wrapped only in a thin, dirty blanket. For a moment, Elena's soul felt as though it had dropped straight through the soles of her worn sneakers. No, 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 she whispered, reaching into the filth without a second thought. Baby, don't you give up. Not out here. Not like this. The child was ice cold, her skin turning blue. Elena pulled her out, hugging the tiny, shivering body against her chest to share her warmth, shielding her from the rain with her own coat. I have to get you inside, Elena gasped, turning to run back to the house. Help! Someone help! I found her. But before she could reach the back door, a scream cut through the storm. What are you doing? Rachel Dawson, the nanny, stood under the patio lights, her face twisted in a mask of horror. Oh my God! You were throwing her away! Help! Guards! She's kidnapping the child! Elena's blood turned to ice. What? No, I found her in the bin. I just pulled her out. Liar, Rachel shrieked. I saw you. You put her in the trash because she wouldn't stop crying. Within seconds, 4 armed guards surrounded Elena, guns drawn. The younger one ripped Lily from her arms. Don't move, bitch. Please listen to me, Elena begged, raising her trembling, dirt-stained hands. She was freezing. I found her in the dumpster. She needs a doctor. Look at her skin. Shut up. A guard struck her across the face. Elena staggered, falling into the mud, tasting blood, but nothing prepared her for the presence that emerged from the mansion. Dominic Corsetti stepped into the rain like death itself. Tall, broad, dressed in a black shirt, his eyes scanning the scene with a rage so cold it stopped her heart. Lily, his voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of an earthquake. He took his daughter from the guard. The child was limp, smelling of rain and refuse. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard a vein pulsed in his temple as he saw the filth smeared on his daughter's pajamas. Then he looked at Elena. You, he growled, his voice dropping to something inhuman. Elena stepped back instinctively, mud and garbage juice staining her uniform, her whole body shaking. Mr. Corsetti, please. I went to empty the trash. I found her inside. I saved her. Don't you speak. He handed Lily to Marco and stormed toward Elena. His voice didn't boom. It sliced, controlled, lethal. You treated my daughter like garbage? You threw my flesh and blood into a dumpster? No. Sir, I swear on my life. The slap came without warning. Elena's head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. She fell to her knees on the wet gravel, gasping. Sir, please. Dominic grabbed her by the hair, forcing her to look up at him. His eyes held nothing but murder. I've killed men for less than looking at my family wrong. And you put my daughter in the trash like she was nothing? Tears streamed down Elena's face, mixing with the rain and mud. I saved her. I swear to God, I saved her. Enough. He released her with a shove that sent her sprawling into the dirt. Marco, a tall man in a dark suit, stepped forward. Marco Benedetti, Dominic's right hand, his expression unreadable. Take her to the basement, Dominic ordered, his back already turned. I'll deal with her after I know my daughter is safe. No, Elena screamed, scrambling to her feet. Please, Mr. Corsetti, I didn't do this. Check the cameras. Check. A guard grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder. The cameras were off, Marco said quietly. Someone disabled them 30 minutes ago. Dominic froze. Then he turned, slowly, and looked at Elena with something worse than rage. Suspicion confirmed. Interesting timing, he said softly. Take her. Now. Please. Elena fought against the guards, but they were too strong. I have a sister. She's sick. She needs me. I would never hurt a child. Please, someone believe me. No one answered. They dragged her across the lawn, her bare feet scraping against stone and grass, her soaked uniform clinging to her trembling body. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, just listen. They shoved her down a flight of stairs and into a cold, dark basement. The door slammed. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed her whole. Elena collapsed onto the concrete floor, hugging herself against the cold. Her cheek throbbed. Her arm ached. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. She curled into herself, a position she knew too well from childhood, from the orphanage, from the years of being blamed for things she didn't do, beaten for crimes she didn't commit. "Not again," she whispered into the dark. "Please, God, not again." Somewhere above, she heard Lily crying. And despite everything, despite the terror, despite the pain, one thought rose above the rest. That little girl is alive, and I saved her. Even if no one believes me, I saved her. Then footsteps echoed down the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. The lock clicked open. Dominic Corsetti stood in the doorway, a gun in his hand, his face carved from stone. "Now," he said quietly, "you're going to tell me exactly what you were doing near my daughter's room tonight. And if I don't like your answer," he raised the gun, "no one will ever find your body." Elena looked up at him, shaking, bleeding, but somehow still breathing. "I saved her," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And one day, you'll know the truth. You'll have to live with what you did to me tonight." For a split second, something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Doubt, confusion, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He stepped into the darkness, and the door closed behind him. If Elena's courage moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay with me because what happens next will leave you breathless. Dominic stepped into the dark basement, the door slamming shut behind him like the lid of a coffin being sealed. The only light came from a single bare bulb overhead, flickering and swaying slightly, casting ghost-like shadows across his face, a face as cold as ice. Elena shrank into the corner, her back pressed to a damp, mold-stained wall, her whole body still soaked through and shaking without pause, her eyes locked on the gun in Dominic's hand, the black muzzle like a dead man's eye staring straight at her. "Speak," Dominic said, his voice frigid and unhurried, as if he had the entire night to break her, from the beginning. "And if I hear even one lie..." He did not have to finish. The gun finished for him. Elena swallowed hard, her throat raw and dry, like swallowing sand. I was taking out the trash," she began, her voice trembling but fighting to stay steady. "Around 11 at night, I went to empty the kitchen waste. I heard a whimper coming from the large metal bin. At first I thought it was a stray animal, but when I lifted the lid, I saw her curled up inside. I pulled her up and gave her rescue breaths until she started breathing again." Dominic stared at her without blinking. His face looked carved from stone, not a single trace of feeling. "That is a good story," he said, his tone sharp with a bitter kind of mockery. "Too perfect, too complete, like you rehearsed it 100 times. I am not making it up," Elena almost screamed, desperation tearing through her. "Why would I hurt a child? What have I ever done to you? I am just the maid." Dominic stepped closer, the soles of his shoes cracking against the concrete like war drums. He bent down until his face was only inches from hers, his hot breath washing over her skin. "How does a maid know how to treat hypothermia?" Elena blinked, the question catching her off guard and tangling her thoughts. I used to work in a nursing home," she said, her voice shrinking. 3 years. I was trained in CPR because a lot of the elderly there had strokes or went into cardiac arrest. It was mandatory." Dominic's brow tightened, a flicker of surprise crossing his eyes before it vanished. "Convenient," he said. "A maid who just happens to know CPR, just happens to check the trash at the right moment, just happens to save my daughter." "You can check my records," Elena said, her voice gaining a harder edge now, even as fear still choked her chest. "Sunrise Nursing Home on the south side of Chicago. I worked there from the age of 22 to 25. They have my CPR certificate." At that moment, the basement door opened. Marco walked in, his face still expressionless, but something had shifted in his eyes. He leaned in and murmured a few words into Dominic's ear. Elena saw Dominic's shoulders go rigid, his jaw clenched tight. "What?" Dominic snapped, turning to Marco, his voice razor cold. "The doctor just finished checking her boss," Marco said, loud enough for Elena to hear. "She has severe hypothermia. The doctor said if she had been out in that cold 5 minutes longer, her heart would have stopped. A lot. The doctor said if it had been 1 or 2 minutes later." He did not finish, but the silence that followed was heavier than any words. Elena let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, a thin thread of hope sparking in her chest. "You see, she really almost drowned. I saved her. I have no reason to hurt her at all." But Dominic did not turn back to look at her. He stood there with his back to her, his shadow stretching across the concrete like a black tower. When he spoke again, his voice was still steel cold. Someone still shut off the cameras, he said slowly. 30 minutes before she was found in the bin. That person has high-level access. And you? He turned, his deep black eyes cutting straight through her, as if he could read every thought inside her skull. You could be an accomplice. Maybe someone hired you to do this. You threw her away. Then you play the hero who saves her. No, Elena screamed, tears spilling out. I do not know anything about the cameras. I do not have any access code. I do not even know the Wi-Fi password in this house. Dominic watched her for a long time, the silence pressing down until it felt impossible to breathe. Then he turned to Marco. Call the police, he said, his voice like a death sentence. Hand her over to them. Attempted murder of a Mafia boss's daughter. He walked toward the door without looking back. She will rot in prison. The police car came to a stop in front of Cook County Jail at nearly 4 a.m. Elena was yanked out, her hands cuffed tight behind her back, her maid's uniform still damp and reeking of sour garbage, and rain mixed with the metallic stink of dried blood on her lips. She staggered forward between 2 officers, her bare feet scraped and raw against the dead-cold concrete. Inside, the fluorescent lights burned so harshly they made her eyes ache after so many hours buried in the basement dark. Intake unfolded like a nightmare with no waking point. They took her fingerprints, photographed her with a number placard pressed against her chest, and confiscated everything she carried, including the cheap bracelet Sophia had given her for her birthday last year. A heavy-set female guard with a face as cold as loose change tossed her an orange jail uniform and barked an order. Change. 2 minutes. Elena peeled off the soaking clothes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the buttons. When she was led into the holding area, a murmur rose like surf. That's her, a shrill woman's voice sliced through from somewhere. The one who tried to kill Corsetti's little girl. Elena kept her head down, forcing herself not to look at anyone, but she could feel dozens of eyes drilling into her back. They shoved her into a shared cell with 5 other women. The moment she stepped inside, the steel door slammed shut behind her. Less than 10 seconds later, a punch from behind sent her sprawling face first onto the concrete. Trash, someone snarled. A large woman with tattoos crawling up and down her arms grabbed Elena by the hair and hauled her upright. You think you can touch a kid? People like you don't deserve to live. Elena barely had time to register what was happening before the second blow landed, a kick driving into her stomach. She folded in on herself, air gone, lungs refusing, then the third, the fourth. Savage laughter rippled around her while she writhed on the floor, arms over her head, trying to protect her face. Blood streamed from her nose, mixing with tears and grit. And in that instant of pain, memory burst through her like floodwater. Elena was back in the dim room at St. Mary's orphanage, where the matron had lashed her with a leather belt over something that had gone missing, something Elena had never taken. She felt again what it was to be 7 years old, curled tight in a corner, crying without sound, wondering why she was being punished for a crime she did not commit. 20 years later, she was still paying for sins that were never hers. Enough, a curt voice snapped. The blows stopped. Elena pried her eyes open and saw a female guard standing beyond the bars, her face blank and indifferent. She did not step in to intervene. She only watched, as if she were enjoying a cheap show. Go to sleep, she said, and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. That night, Elena lay curled on the lowest bunk, every breath a knife sliding in and out of her ribs. She did not dare sob out loud, letting the tears seep silently into the thin pillow. In the dark, she thought of Sophia, her little sister lying in their cramped apartment on the south side, her fragile heart beating in uneven, frightened pulses, waiting for a surgery that now would never come. $200,000, a number Elena had been scraping together for 5 years, and still she was only halfway there. And now, here in jail with an attempted murder charge hanging over her, she knew every hope had dissolved into smoke. I'm sorry, Sophia, she whispered into the dark. I broke my promise. Suddenly a hand touched her shoulder. Elena jerked around, her heart hammering. A middle-aged woman with graying hair sat on the bunk beside her, eyes glinting in the darkness. Hey, kid, the woman whispered, her voice rough and thick as if she had smoked her whole life. I'll give you a piece of free advice. Elena said nothing, only stared. The woman leaned closer, her breath heavy with the stench of cheap cigarettes against Elena's face. Corsetti bought this whole jail, she said, each word punching into Elena's chest. The guards, the inmates, even the warden. All of them belonged to him. She paused, a half-smile creeping across her wrinkled face. You're not going to live long enough to see your court date, kid. 3 days inside the jail passed like 3 years. Elena survived each hour by avoiding every gaze, pressing herself into whatever corner she could find, and swallowing her tears back down her throat each night. The bruises on her body had shifted from purple to a deep blue-black, and every movement throbbed as if 1,000 needles were being driven into her flesh. But no physical pain compared to what she felt when she saw Sophia walk into the visiting room. Her sister was thinner than the last time Elena had seen her, her cheeks sunken, her skin pale as paper, moving slowly with a labored breath that seemed to weigh on her chest. Sophia sat on the other side of the dividing glass, lifted the internal phone, and tears immediately spilled over. "Sister?" Sophia sobbed, her voice breaking through the receiver. "Look at you. What did they do to you? Your face." Elena raised a hand to touch the bruise along her cheekbone and forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. I just fell. It looks worse than it really is." "Don't lie to me," Sophia cried harder. "I know they beat you. I know everything. Why is this happening? You didn't do anything wrong." Elena swallowed, her throat clenched tight. She wanted to cry, to scream that she was terrified to the point of dying, that she might never leave this place. But when she looked into her sister's reddened eyes, she knew she was not allowed to break. "Listen to me," Elena said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "Everything is going to be okay. I didn't do anything wrong, and the truth will come out. I just need you to stay strong, take your medicine on time, and wait for me to come home." Sophia shook her head, tears falling in steady streams. "You don't understand. The doctor said I only have 2 months if I don't get the surgery." Elena's heart clenched as if someone had wrapped a fist around it. 2 months, 60 days, and she was locked in a cell on an attempted murder charge. No bail, no lawyer, no hope. "Sophia." "I'm not afraid to die," Sophia said, her voice trembling but straining for courage. "I'm only afraid you'll be alone. I'm afraid no one will take care of you when I'm gone." "Don't say that," Elena ground out, and at last the tears broke free. "You're going to be okay. I promise. I'll find a way. Visiting time is over." The guard's cold voice cut through them like a blade. Sophia stood and pressed her hand to the glass. Elena lifted her own hand to the matching spot, feeling only the chill of the barrier instead of the warmth of her sister's skin. "I love you," Sophia whispered. "I love you too." Then Sophia was led away, her small, fragile figure disappearing behind the door. Elena stayed seated for a few seconds, head bowed, tears dropping onto the metal table. She thought they would take her back to the cell, but the guard escorted her somewhere else. An interrogation room with metal chairs, a metal table, and walls the color of old ash. Waiting inside was a black woman in her early 50s, short hair streaked with salt and pepper, wearing a gray blazer with a police badge clipped to her belt. Her eyes were sharp, but unlike the others Elena had met, they were not cruel. "Sit down," the woman said, steady and controlled. "I'm Detective Sarah Mitchell. I'm in charge of investigating your case." Elena sat, wary. "I already told the police everything. I don't have anything else to say." Mitchell opened a case file and turned a few pages. "I'm not here to listen to you repeat your statement. I'm here because something about Rachel Dawson's story doesn't add up." Elena lifted her head, her heart beating faster. "What did you say?" "She says she saw you throwing the child into the dumpster," Mitchell said slowly, watching Elena's reaction. But according to the doctor's report, the child was wrapped in your coat to warm her up. There were traces of your body heat preserving hers. If you meant to throw her away, why would you pull her out and try to keep her warm?" Elena said nothing, only stared at Mitchell with a look that held hope and suspicion at the same time. "I need you to answer a few questions," Mitchell continued. "Why were you working for the Corsetti family? Did you have any grudge against them?" "No," Elena answered immediately. "I only needed the money. My sister has a congenital heart condition, and she needs surgery urgently. The job at the Corsetti estate paid more than anywhere else I've ever worked. That's the only reason." Mitchell nodded and wrote in her notebook. "Did you know anyone in the Corsetti family before you worked there?" "No. I applied through a staffing agency. I had never even spoken to Mr. Corsetti directly until that night." Mitchell studied her for a long moment, eyes weighing something unseen. Then she stood, closed her notebook, and said, "I'll keep investigating." But before she left the room, she paused at the doorway and looked back. Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. The security cameras were shut off from inside the house 30 minutes before it happened. Whoever did it had a high-level access code, the kind only family members and management-level staff are given. She held Elena's gaze. "You don't have that code, do you?" Elena shook her head, her pulse pounding. No, I'm just the maid. I'm not even allowed in the main bedroom wing. Mitchell nodded slowly, a strange glint passing through her eyes. That's what I thought, she said, and walked out, leaving Elena sitting there with her heart racing and a thread of hope as thin and fragile as a strand of sky silk. A scream tore through the quiet night inside the Corsetti estate. Dominic jolted upright, barefoot, sprinting down the hallway toward Lily's room. When he burst in, his daughter was curled tight on the bed, her face drenched in tears, her eyes wide with terror. Baby, baby! Dominic pulled her into his arms, feeling her small body shaking violently against his chest. I'm here. You're safe. It's okay. Water, Lily sobbed, her words strangled by panic. I saw water. I couldn't breathe. I'm scared. Dominic held her tighter, his chest feeling as if something sharp had been driven straight through it. This was the 4th night in a row. Every night the same. Screaming, crying, and the part that unsettled him most. Where is Miss Elena? Lily whispered, lifting her wet face to him. I want Miss Elena. She saved me. She held me. Dominic went rigid. It wasn't the first time Lily had asked for that woman. For days now she had kept asking about Elena, begging to see her, insisting she had saved her. Rachel had tried to explain that Elena was bad, but Lily only shook her head and cried harder. Dominic soothed her until she drifted back toward sleep, but Lily's words kept drilling into his mind like a bit through bone. Victims don't beg to see the person who hurt them. A 3-year-old doesn't know how to lie. So then, he went downstairs to his study, where Marco was already waiting with a thick file in his hands. Background checks complete, boss, Marco said, setting the file on the desk. On Elena Vasquez. Dominic sat and opened it. Each page felt like a slap across his face. Elena Maria Vasquez, 27, born in Chicago. Orphaned at 7, raised in St. Mary's Orphanage until she turned 18. Worked at Sunrise Nursing Home for 3 years. Highly rated for diligence and dedication. Then moved into domestic work for wealthy families to earn higher pay. Reason: supporting her sister Sophia Vasquez, 22, born with a congenital heart condition, urgently needing surgery costing $200,000. No criminal record. No history of violence. No ties to any enemies of the Corsetti family. She's completely clean, Marco said quietly. No motive, no violent past, nothing. Just a poor girl trying to save her sister. Dominic slammed the file shut, jaw clenched so hard it ached. Something was wrong, something he had missed. Brother, a familiar voice called from the doorway. Vincent Corsetti walked in, his usual smile fixed in place, his expensive suit without a single wrinkle. Dominic's younger brother had always been the picture of polished perfection, but tonight Dominic watched him with different eyes. I heard the kid had another nightmare, Vincent said, dropping into the chair across from him without being invited. Poor little thing. That's heavy trauma. She'll be fine, Dominic answered curtly. Oh, by the way, Vincent leaned forward, voice lowering. I heard that Maid is still alive in jail. You should finish it. Kill her. Make an example out of anyone who thinks they can touch the Corsetti family. Dominic stared at him, saying nothing. Think about it, Vincent went on. Letting her live only creates problems. She could talk to the cops. She could cause a scandal. Kill her, bury her somewhere, and it's done. Why are you so eager? Dominic asked, his voice ice cold. Vincent blinked, briefly startled. What? I asked why you're so eager to see that girl dead. She didn't do anything to you. I'm just looking out for you, Vincent said quickly, the smile still there but his eyes flickering. Looking out for Lily. Looking out for our family. Dominic didn't answer, only nodded slowly. Vincent stayed a few minutes more, talking business, then stood to leave. Before he went, he stopped by Lily's room, spoke to her with a face full of concern, then finally walked out. When the sound of Vincent's car faded into the distance, Dominic turned to Marco. Pull up the security feed from Lily's room. Marco did. The video appeared on the laptop screen. Vincent stepped into Lily's room, smiling bright, voice sweet as syrup. But when Lily turned away to grab her teddy bear, Vincent's face changed completely. The smile vanished, replaced by something cold and disgusted. He looked at the child the way you look at an obstacle, something you hate. Then when Lily turned back, the smile snapped right back onto his mouth as if it had never left. Dominic stared at the screen, the blood in his veins turning to ice. Marco, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I want you to start over. I want every single person who was in that estate that night investigated again from the beginning. He turned to Marco, his his deep black eyes burning like live coals, including Rachel, including Vincent. Marco Benedetti did not sleep for 3 nights straight. He sat in the hidden room beneath the estate's basement, surrounded by computer monitors, thick files, and a cup of coffee gone cold and bitter. Dominic's order had been crystal clear: investigate everyone. And Marco never did anything halfway. He started with Rachel Dawson. On the surface, she was the perfect nanny. 29 years old, a childcare credential from a well-regarded college, a spotless record, recommended by a reputable agency. But when Marco dug into her bank activity, the facade began to crack. 1 week before the fateful night, Rachel's account suddenly received $50,000, an enormous amount for a nanny earning less than $4,000 a month. Marco traced the money, followed its trail through 3 intermediary accounts, until he found the source, a company called Blackstone Holdings LLC. The name made Marco frown. He had heard it somewhere before. He went deeper, tore through corporate records, and his heart seemed to stall when the answer finally surfaced. Blackstone Holdings LLC was a shell company, one of dozens used to launder money and hide illegal transactions. And the person behind it was none other than Vincent Corsetti. Marco leaned back, rubbing his forehead. What did this mean? Vincent paid Rachel. For what? He kept digging, this time focusing on the security cameras. The estate's cameras had been shut off, but Marco had another idea. He contacted the neighbors to the east, the Harrison family, who had their own security system aimed toward the border between the 2 properties. Mr. Harrison agreed to let Marco view the footage without asking many questions, partly out of respect for the Corsettis, partly out of fear, and what Marco saw made his blood boil. At 11 that night, the camera captured Rachel Dawson carrying a heavy bundle wrapped in a blanket toward the back of the kitchen. She moved quickly, checking over her shoulder. She stopped at the large metal dumpsters. She struggled to lift the heavy lid with one hand, then mercilessly dropped the bundle inside. She closed the lid and walked back into the house, dusting off her hands as if she had just taken out the trash. Rachel did not move. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. Then Rachel turned and walked back into the house, slowly, as if nothing had happened at all. You bitch, Marco ground out through his teeth. He needed more proof. He went to Eduardo, the gardener who had worked for the Corsetti family for more than 20 years. The old man trembled when Marco questioned him, but in the end he confessed the truth. I saw Rachel take the little girl outside that night, Eduardo said in a whisper. I was putting tools away in the shed. I saw her carrying something big wrapped in a blanket, Eduardo said in a whisper. I was putting tools away. I saw her throw it into the dumpster. I heard a thud, and then a cry. I thought it was a cat, but then I got scared. I ran into the shed and hid. I'm sorry. I'm old. I was afraid of getting dragged into it. Marco took the statement, then moved to the next step. He called the doctor who had examined Lily after that night and demanded a more detailed report. And what the doctor said made Marco grip the edge of his chair so hard he thought he might fall. I found traces of a sedative in the child's blood, the doctor said over the phone. A mild dose, an adult medication, but diluted. That's why she couldn't save herself when she went into the water. She was drugged beforehand. Marco sat in silence. Every piece started clicking into place, forming a sickening picture. Rachel was paid by Vincent. Rachel led Lily to the pool after drugging her. Rachel stood there and watched the child sink without intervening. And when Elena appeared and saved Lily, Rachel pinned it on her. This wasn't an attempted murder by a maid. This was a carefully planned killing plot, engineered from inside the Corsetti family itself. One last question remained. Who shut off the cameras? Marco went back into the security system and dug into the access logs. And when he found the answer, he had to read it 3 times to be sure his eyes weren't lying. The access code used to disable the cameras at exactly 10:30 that night belonged to one person. Not Rachel. Not any employee. It was Vincent Corsetti's code. Marco picked up the phone and dialed Dominic. His voice was low and heavy when the line connected. Boss, I know who shut off the cameras that night. He paused, swallowing hard. And you're not gonna like the answer. The sealed room beneath the Corsetti estate's basement was cold as a tomb. A single bare bulb swung overhead, throwing restless bands of light and shadow across raw concrete walls. Rachel Dawson sat on a wooden chair in the center of the room, her hands bound tight behind her back, her face drained to the color of death. Dominic walked in, Marco behind him. He said nothing, only dragged a chair into place across from Rachel and sat down. His eyes were black pits, empty of feeling. Mr. Corsetti, Rachel spoke first, her voice shaking as tears began to slide down her cheeks. I don't know why I'm here. I told the truth. Elena Vasquez tried to kill Lily. I saw it with my own eyes. Dominic stayed silent, only staring at her. That silence was more frightening than any threat. Please believe me, Rachel cried harder, tears and snot smearing across her face. I love Lily like she's my own. I would never let anything happen to her. Elena, that maid, she's the guilty one. She threw Lily in the trash. I swear to you. Dominic slowly opened the file Marco had prepared. He placed the first page on the table and turned it toward Rachel. Explain to me, he said, his voice ice cold, where the $50,000 in your account came from. Rachel's face went even paler. She stared at the bank statement, her lips moving, but no sound came out. I don't know, she stammered. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone sent it to the wrong account. Dominic laid down the second page. The money came from a company called Blackstone Holdings LLC, a shell company. Then the third page. That company belongs to my brother, Vincent Corsetti. It was as if lightning had struck her. Rachel shook her head violently. No, you have it wrong. I don't know Mr. Vincent. I don't know anything about that company. Dominic didn't answer. He pulled out a laptop and played the video. The screen filled with the neighbor's security footage. Rachel walking toward the dumpsters with a bundle in her arms. Rachel lifting the lid. Rachel throwing the child inside like a bag of refuse. Rachel walking away without looking back. No, Rachel screamed, shrill and breaking. That isn't me. The video is edited. Someone edited it to frame me. Dominic shut the video off and placed one more page on the table. The doctor's report, he said slowly. Lily had a sedative in her blood that night. Someone gave my daughter a sleeping drug before taking her out to the dumpsters. He leaned forward until his face was inches from Rachel's. You expect me to believe Elena Vasquez, a maid who's only been working here for 6 months, somehow got her hands on a sedative, snuck into my daughter's room, drugged her, led her outside, threw her in the dumpster, then pulled her out to warm her up just to play the hero? For what? To play the hero. His voice rose, each word a knife driven deeper into Rachel. Or is it you, Rachel Dawson, the woman with $50,000 from my brother, the woman on camera standing there while my daughter sank, the woman who can access Lily's bedroom whenever she wants, who is guilty? Rachel collapsed. Her body sagged like a puppet with its strings cut. The crying was no longer performance. It was the raw terror of someone who knew she had reached the end of the road. Please, she sobbed. Please spare me. I didn't want to kill her. Vincent told me he only wanted to scare her. He said all I had to do was leave her there for just a few minutes and pull her back out right away, so you'd realize she needed better protection. I didn't know. I didn't think she would almost die. Why? Dominic roared, surging to his feet so fast the chair toppled backward. Why would my brother want to hurt my daughter? Rachel trembled, tears pouring like a river. He said if there's no Lily, you won't have an heir. He'll be the one to take over everything when you die. He said the Corsetti empire should have been his from the beginning, but your father chose you only because you're the oldest. She paused, gulping air. Vincent said Elena was the perfect prey. A poor girl, no family, no money, no power. No one would believe her. You would kill her, and it would all be over. No one would ever know the truth. Dominic stood there, motionless as stone, but his hand began to shake, not from fear, but from rage building like a volcano about to split the earth. That bastard, he ground out, his voice the low thunder before a storm. That bastard almost killed my daughter. And he slammed his fist into the table, the sound exploding through the room like a gunshot. And I threw the woman who saved my child into jail. I beat her. I let people almost kill her in there for a crime she never committed. He turned to Marco, his eyes burning like open flame. Where is Vincent? Marco glanced at his phone, his voice low. Our sources say he's at the private airfield on the south side of the city. His jet is scheduled to take off in 2 hours. Destination Mexico. Dominic strode to the weapons cabinet on the wall, unlocked it, and took out the silver-plated pistol his father had left behind. He checked the magazine, then tucked the gun into his waistband. Get the car ready, he told Marco, his voice steel cold. I've got a trip to make. The black Rolls-Royce tore through the Chicago night like a hunting beast. Dominic sat in the back seat, his face swallowed by shadow, his eyes burning like 2 live coals. Marco drove, glancing at his boss now and then through the rearview mirror, but he did not dare speak. Midway Executive, a private airfield on the southern edge of the city, was familiar ground for the wealthy who wanted to come and go without being seen. When Dominic's convoy poured onto the runway, Vincent's private jet was already powered up, ready to lift off, but it was too late. 5 black SUVs blocked the strip, and more than 20 of Dominic's gunmen locked the plane inside a ring that could not be broken. Vincent descended the aircraft stairs, surprise flashing across his face before it settled back into that practiced calm. He stood there in a black suit, hair slicked smooth, looking more like a successful businessman than a man who had just plotted to kill his own niece. "Brother," Vincent said, a half-smile curling his mouth. "Here to see me off?" "No need. I'm just taking a little vacation for a few weeks." Dominic stepped out of the car and walked toward him, slow, measured, not speaking until he was less than 3 meters away, close enough to see the beads of sweat on Vincent's brow despite the winter night that cut like a blade. "Rachel told everything," Dominic said, his voice low and dangerous. $50,000. The shell company, the sleeping drug, all of it. The smile died on Vincent's lips. He stood in silence for a moment. And then he laughed, a cold, unhinged sound. "So you know," Vincent said, no longer pretending. "Fine, I'm tired too. Tired of playing the good little brother for 38 years. Dominic's mind flickered back to childhood, 2 brothers growing up in their father's mansion. Vincent always the one behind, the one measured against him, the one never quite enough. "Dominic can do it, why can't you?" Their father had said hundreds of times, and each time Dominic had watched Vincent's eyes darken a little more. "You think you deserve everything?" Vincent roared, bitterness spilling out raw. "This empire, this power, this respect? What did you do to earn it? You're just the oldest son. You were born 2 years before me, that's all. But father chose you, left everything to you, and I had to live my whole life in your shadow." He took a step forward, eyes bloodshot. "I worked like a dog. I killed for this empire. I sacrificed everything. And what did you have? You had Lily, a daughter, an heir. And me? I had nothing. When you die, everything goes to the little girl. I stay Dominic Corsetti's brother forever. The shadow standing behind you. Nothing more." "So you plan to kill my daughter?" Dominic asked, his voice ice cold. "So there would be no heir? So you could take it all?" Vincent let out a sharp, ugly little laugh. "A perfect plan, right? The girl dies, you have no heir, and that poor Maid becomes the scapegoat. Who would believe an orphan against the Corsetti family? She rots in prison. You suffer with your loss, and I stand beside you and comfort you like a good brother. Then when you collapse, I take everything." He tilted his head, the smile on his face turning poisonous. "But that woman had to jump in and save her. Ruined everything." Dominic said nothing. In him, the rage had passed the point of boiling and become something colder, more dangerous. The stillness before the storm breaks. Vincent seemed to feel it. He took a step back, his hand sliding slowly inside his suit jacket. "You going to kill me, brother?" Vincent asked, his voice trembling. "Kill your own blood? I'm considering it," Dominic replied. In the next instant, Vincent yanked a gun from his jacket and aimed it straight at Dominic, but before he could pull the trigger, a shot cracked from behind. The bullet tore through Vincent's wrist, and the pistol flew away. Vincent screamed and dropped to his knees on the runway, blood spilling from the wound. Marco stepped out of the darkness, the gun in his hand still smoking. "I had you lined up from the start," Marco said coldly. "Boss's order." Dominic walked up and stood over Vincent as he writhed on the ground, looking down at his brother with eyes that held no love at all. "Death is too easy for you," Dominic said. "I'm not going to kill you, Vincent. I'm going to do worse." He turned to Marco. "Exile him. Erase him in the world we live in. From now on, he is no longer Corsetti. No name, no money, no power. If he sets foot back in Chicago, kill him without questions." Vincent looked up, terror filling his face. "You can't do that. I'm your blood. You died to me the moment you touched my daughter," Dominic said, then turned his back and walked away. He got into the car and left Vincent's screams echoing into the night. On the drive back, Dominic stared at the watch on his wrist, 3 a.m. Elena was still in jail. She had been there nearly 2 weeks, beaten, humiliated, abandoned by the whole world, because of him. Dominic Corsetti, the feared Chicago Mafia boss, who had killed countless enemies without a tremor in his hand, sat in the darkness with his fists clenched tight, and for the first time in his life, he did not know what words could possibly be enough to ask forgiveness from another human being. The iron gate of Cook County Jail swung open with a shriek of metal on metal. Elena Vasquez stepped out, squinting into the morning sunlight she had not seen in 2 weeks. She wore the same old clothes they handed back at release, a wrinkled shirt and jeans worn thin at the knees, but fabric could not hide the bruises blooming along her arms, the long scrape on her neck, or her swollen mouth still marked by what the jail had done to her. She walked slowly, one careful step at a time, as if her legs had forgotten how to move on free ground. The brightness stung her eyes, or maybe it was the tears she had forced down for 14 straight days and nights finally finding their way out. And then she saw him. Dominic Corsetti stood beside a gleaming black Rolls-Royce, gray suit, hair slicked neat, looking more like a polished businessman than the Chicago Mafia boss who had almost destroyed her life. He watched her with a face she could not read, black eyes fixed on her as she came through the gate. Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second when she recognized him. Her heart sped up, not from fear, but from the fury rising deep in her chest. She remembered his slap. She remembered his hand in her hair. She remembered his cold voice ordering her into the basement. She remembered 2 weeks of hell inside that jail. The beatings, the humiliation, the daily threats that she would be killed before she ever saw a judge. She met his eyes for 1 second, then turned her head and kept walking as if he were nothing more than a streetlight. Elena, his voice called after her. She did not stop. Elena, please stop. She kept going, faster now. Footsteps hurried behind her. Please, just let me speak. His hand touched her shoulder, and that was the last drop. Elena spun around, her arm swung up, and the slap cracked loud across the parking lot outside the jail gate. Dominic Corsetti, the feared Chicago Mafia boss no one dared look in the eye, stood there and took it. He did not dodge. He did not strike back. He did not say a word. "You have the nerve to stand here," Elena shouted, her voice breaking open with every ounce of pain and rage that had been piling up for 2 weeks. "You have the nerve to look at me after what you did." She stepped closer and stabbed a finger toward his face. "You almost ruined my life. You hit me. You locked me in a dark basement. You handed me to the police for attempted murder for something I didn't do. You let people almost kill me in there." Tears poured down her cheeks, but her voice stayed hard as iron. "I saved your daughter. I jumped into that freezing pool to pull her out. I gave her rescue breaths until she started breathing again. And you slapped me. You knocked me down. You called me a murderer." She stopped, panting, her chest rising and falling. "Do you even know what I went through these 2 weeks? Do you know what they did to me in there? Look," she yanked up her sleeve, exposing the mottled bruises. "This is what your bought inmates gave me. This is the price I paid because you believed a snake, instead of using your head to think." Dominic did not move. His eyes darkened, but he offered no excuse. He only stood there and took each word as if it were a blade driven into his chest. "I know," he finally said, his voice low and hoarse. "I know I was wrong. I don't have anything to defend myself with. I just wanted to." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope, holding it out to her. "This is compensation for what you suffered, and the cost of your sister's surgery. It's all in here, $250,000. Elena looked at the envelope, then lifted her gaze to his face. 1 second, 2, then she laughed, bitter and cold. "You think money can buy my dignity?" She snatched the envelope from his hand and hurled it straight into his face. Bills scattered into the wind, fluttering down like autumn leaves. "I don't need your dirty money," Elena said, her voice trembling but proud. "I'm not something you can buy. I don't sell my dignity to anyone, not even the Chicago Mafia boss." She turned her back and walked away without looking back. Dominic stood in the parking lot with money swirling around his shoes, watching the small figure of the woman he had once thought no more than an aunt. And for the first time in his life, he felt small. Elena had gone only a few dozen meters when the phone in her pocket began to ring. She pulled it out, saw Sophia's name, and answered, forcing her voice steady. "Sweetheart, I'm out. I'm coming home. Sister." Sophia's voice, weak and broken, cut through, accompanied by the steady beeping of a heart monitor. I'm at the hospital. I fainted this morning," the doctor said. Her voice caught. "The doctor said I don't have much time left. Can you come?" The phone almost slipped from Elena's hand. She stood frozen in the road, shaking head to toe, the world around her collapsing into silence. "Wait for me," she whispered, her throat tight with grief. I'm coming right now." Elena ran through the streets of Chicago as if her life depended on it, her heart battering wildly inside her chest, because in a way it did. She had no money for a cab, no car, nothing but legs worn down to the bone after 2 weeks in jail, and still she ran, step after step, sweat mixing with tears on a face still bruised and swollen. Cook County Hospital rose ahead of her like a white fortress. She burst through the glass doors, nearly colliding with a nurse, and gasped out a question about the emergency room. She found Sophia on a hospital bed, her small body nearly swallowed by wires and machines, the heart monitor chiming in steady beeps, slow and measured, as if counting down the last seconds of a life. "Sophia," Elena whispered, dropping to her knees beside the bed and gripping her sister's icy hand. "I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't with you." Sophia opened her eyes, dulled by exhaustion, but she still tried to smile. "You're out? Are you hurt?" Even now, her sister worried about Elena instead of herself. Elena bit her lip, forcing a sob back down. "I'm fine. You're the one we have to worry about. You're going to be okay. Listen to me." "Miss Vasquez." A doctor's voice came from behind. Elena turned to see a middle-aged man in a white coat, his expression grave, and he motioned her into the hallway. "Your sister's condition is extremely critical," he said plainly, without softness. "Her heart is failing faster than we expected. If she doesn't have surgery within 48 hours, I'm afraid that—" He did not finish, but Elena understood. "Do the surgery now," she said, her voice tight and breaking. "Do whatever you have to do." The doctor looked at her with pity. "The cost of the operation is $200,000, Miss Vasquez. The hospital needs at least 70% paid up front before we can proceed." $200,000. The number rang inside Elena's head like a funeral bell. She did not have $200 in her pocket at that moment, so how could she have 200,000? She walked out of the hospital and collapsed onto the steps, her head in her hands. She thought of everyone she knew, every place she could possibly borrow from. She called her former supervisor at the nursing home and was refused. She called a few old coworkers and no one picked up. She called the bank and was laughed at because she had no collateral. No one lends money to a girl fresh out of jail. No one believes someone branded with attempted murder of a Mafia boss's daughter. She was drowning in desperation when a familiar black car pulled up in front of her. Marco Benedetti stepped out, an envelope in his hand. "Miss Vasquez," he said, his voice low. "I picked this up in the parking lot this morning." Elena recognized the cash envelope she had thrown into Dominic's face. Her hands shook as she took it, opened it, and counted. $50,000. Only 50,000. The rest had scattered into the wind or been scooped up by strangers. She was still short 150,000. Elena stared at the money, then stared at her phone. She had one last option. She opened her contacts and found a number she had saved long ago but never dared to call. The number of a loan shark on the south side. A man people whispered would lend to anyone, as long as they were willing to pay with their life if they could not repay. Her finger trembled as she hit call. "Hello?" The voice on the line was cold as ice. "I want to borrow $150,000, Elena said, her voice breaking apart. "I'll do anything. Please, hang up." A familiar voice spoke from behind her. Elena turned, her heart stalling. Dominic Corsetti stood there, black suit, face hard as stone, but his eyes were different from the last time she had seen him. "What are you doing here?" Elena asked, wary. "I paid for your sister's surgery," Dominic said, his voice low. "All of it. The doctor is preparing the operating room." Elena stood rooted to the ground, unable to believe what she had heard. "What? $200,000, Dominic went on. "Paid in full. Your sister will have surgery within 1 hour." Tears spilled out, beyond her control. Elena did not know whether she was crying from relief, from anger, or from both at once. "Why?" she asked, her voice strangled. "What do you want from me? You want me to owe you? You want me to be your debt slave for the rest of my life?" Dominic shook his head slowly. "I don't want anything." "Then why?" Elena almost shouted. "Why do this after everything you did to me?" Dominic was silent for a long time. His gaze dropped to the ground as if searching for the one set of words that would not sound like a lie. "Because it's the right thing," he finally said. "Not so you'll forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm doing it because you deserve to save your sister, because you saved my daughter when no one else did." He lifted his eyes to her, and in them was something Elena had never seen in this Mafia boss: remorse. "This isn't a debt," Dominic said. "No conditions, no strings. You don't owe me anything." Before Elena could say another word, a nurse hurried out. "Miss Vasquez? We're taking your sister into surgery. Do you want to see her before the operation?" Elena turned and ran inside without another word to Dominic. She held Sophia's hand one last time before the operating room doors closed, whispering love and promises into her sister's ear. And then she sank to her knees in front of that door, hands clasped, lips moving with silent prayers. "Please, God, save my sister," she whispered. "She's all I have in this world." At the far end of the hallway, Dominic Corsetti stood in the shadows, watching the small figure of the woman on her knees, and he wanted to step forward. He wanted to say something, but he did not dare, and he simply stood there in silence, like a sinner outside the gates of heaven, knowing he had no right to enter. Elena looked at Mia Corsetti standing in front of her, a young woman with straightforward eyes and a sincere bow of the head, and in all of Elena's 27 years, no one from that kind of wealth had ever lowered themselves to apologize to her like that. "I don't know what to say," Elena finally replied, guarded. "You came to apologize. But can an apology erase what I went through?" Mia lifted her head, her gaze steady. "No, and I know that. An apology can't erase the bruises on your body, can't give you back those 2 weeks in jail, can't heal what my brother did. But I didn't come here only to say I'm sorry." She paused and took a deep breath. "I came because of Lily." At that name, something sharp tightened in Elena's chest, and she remembered the child's wide eyes when she woke after being saved, the tiny hand clutching Elena's shirt, the weak crying in the night it all happened. "How is Lily?" Elena asked, unable to hide the worry in her voice. "She won't eat," Mia said, pain in every word. "She can't sleep. She has nightmares every night and screams your name. She asks about you every day and none of us can calm her down." Mia held Elena's eyes. "You're the only person she wants. She needs you." Elena turned her face away and gripped the edge of Sophia's hospital bed, her sister asleep now, breathing steadily after a successful surgery. "I can't," Elena said, her voice hardening. "I don't want to set foot in that house again. I don't want to see him." "Dominic won't appear," Mia said quickly. "I promise. Just me and Lily. You don't have to see him or speak to him. You only have to come for Lily." Elena went quiet for a long time, thinking of a 3-year-old waiting for her, a child she had risked her life to pull from freezing water, a child with no guilt in her small body, only fear and a need for someone who made the world feel safe. "All right," Elena said at last. "I'll come, but only for Lily." The next afternoon, Mia brought Elena to the Corsetti estate, and when the car stopped at the gate, Elena felt her whole body tighten, because this was the place where she had been struck and humiliated and thrown into darkness. But she drew a deep breath and stepped out anyway. Mia led her inside, avoiding Dominic's office wing, and they climbed the stairs and walked down the hallway to Lily's bedroom. When the door opened, Elena saw the little girl sitting on the bed with a teddy bear in her arms, big eyes heavy with sadness. But the moment Lily saw Elena, everything changed. "Miss Elena," the child cried, leaping off the bed and running toward her so fast she nearly tripped, and Elena dropped to her knees to catch her as small arms locked around her neck, as if letting go would make her vanish. "I missed you," Lily sobbed, tears soaking Elena's shoulder. "I missed you so much. Why didn't you come see me? Did I do something wrong?" Elena's heart felt squeezed in a fist. She held the child tightly, fighting her own tears. "No, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner. I'm here now. You're safe." She lifted Lily onto her lap and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the child curl into her as Lily clung to her and refused to let go even for a second. "Don't go again," Lily whispered. "Stay with me." Elena didn't answer, only stroked the child's hair with gentle patience. Mia stood in the doorway watching, eyes shining with tears, then quietly slipped away and closed the door so they could have the room to themselves. Outside the window, the sky darkened, and Lily still refused to sleep, holding on to Elena as if closing her eyes would make Elena disappear. "Do you want me to sing for you?" Elena asked softly. Lily nodded, eyes swollen with tears, and Elena began to sing, a lullaby an old supervisor at the nursing home had taught her when she first started working there, her voice clear and tender, filling the quiet room like cool water, beginning with, "Hush, little baby, do not say a word," and then continuing in the same soothing, promise-filled rhythm, offering comfort with imagined gifts and gentle reassurances until the fear loosened its grip. Word by word the sound wrapped around Lily, and little by little the child's body relaxed, her breathing slowed, her eyelids drifted down, and she fell asleep curled in Elena's arms, tiny fingers still gripping the hem of Elena's shirt as if to anchor her in place. Out in the hallway, Dominic stood in the shadows with his back against the wall. He had promised not to appear, yet he could not stop himself from coming close, and Elena's singing carried through the barely closed door, pure and warm, and for the first time since Bianca died, Dominic felt a strange calm spread through his chest. He stood there in silence, listening to each note as if it were something he had forgotten for a very long time. Then the singing stopped, and inside the room Lily slept deeply, breathing even and peaceful. Elena looked down at the child's angel face and a faint smile touched her lips. Suddenly Lily shifted, her mouth moving in sleep. "Mommy," the child whispered, slurred but clear. "Mommy." Elena went still. Her heart missed a beat, and she stared down at the child in her arms, not knowing how to react. Outside the door, Dominic also froze, his hand braced against the wall, eyes fixed on nothing at all, because it was one word, only one, yet it was enough to steal the breath from both of them. 3 days after the night Elena sang Lily to sleep, an envelope appeared in Sophia's hospital room. Inside was a handwritten letter from Dominic Corsetti, along with an employment contract. Elena read every line, her brows knitting tight. "He wants me to be Lily's official nanny," she told Sophia, suspicion plain in her voice. "5 times what I used to make as a maid, a private apartment on the estate, comprehensive health insurance for both of us." Sophia lay in the hospital bed, recovering far better after the surgery, though she still needed a few more weeks of rest. She took the letter from her sister's hands, skimmed it, then looked up at Elena. "You're going to refuse." "Of course," Elena said immediately. "I don't want anything to do with him anymore. I don't want to live in that house." "Elena," Sophia said gently, eyes carrying a kind of understanding far older than 22. "I know he hurt you, but think carefully. You lost your job. You have a record now, even if you've been cleared, and people won't hire you easily. And me," she stopped and looked down at her hands. "I still need follow-up visits and monthly medication. Where is the money going to come from?" Elena fell silent. Sophia was right. She had nothing. No job, no savings, no future. And Lily. Sophia went on. "You told me she called you mommy in her sleep. She needs you, Elena. It's not that Mafia boss who needs you. It's a 3-year-old who lost her mother and needs someone who makes her feel safe." Elena stared out the window where the late afternoon light was fading. She thought of Lily, those wide, hopeful eyes, those tiny arms locked around her neck as if Elena was the whole world. "You deserve to be compensated," Sophia said. "And this isn't selling your dignity. This is you working, being paid what you're worth, and helping a child who needs you. There's nothing shameful about that." 2 days later, Elena arrived at the Corsetti estate with a small suitcase and a list of conditions as long as her arm. Dominic received her in the living room, his face as cold as ever, but something like relief flickered in his eyes when he saw her. "Before I sign anything," Elena said, her voice hard as steel, "you need to understand a few things." Dominic nodded and sat across from her. "I'm listening. First, I am not your servant. I am Lily's nanny, and my job is to care for her, not to cater to you or anyone else in this house." "Agreed." "Second, you do not give me orders. If you want something from me, you say please. If I do it, you say thank you. I don't care who you are out there. In this house you treat me like a human being." Dominic frowned for a moment, as if no one had ever dared set terms with him, and then he nodded. "Agreed." "Third, I have the right to refuse any request I consider unreasonable, and you cannot fire me simply because I disagree with you." "Agreed." Elena studied him for a long beat, searching for deceit in his eyes and finding none. "All right," she said at last. "I accept." The first week passed in strange, almost unreal moments. Elena moved into a small apartment on the grounds, a cozy space with a bedroom, a living room, and her own kitchen. She spent most of her time with Lily, walking her through the gardens, reading stories out loud, playing the simple games a 3-year-old loved. And Lily, like a wilted flower suddenly given water, began to eat normally again, sleep more peacefully, and slowly, gradually, the smile returned to her angel face. And Dominic had to learn how to live with the new rules. For the first time in his life, he had to say please to someone who was not a business partner and not an enemy to be bought. "Could you please bring Lily to the dining room?" he said awkwardly, as if the word belonged to a foreign language. Elena looked at him, surprise flickering across her eyes, and then she nodded. "Yes." After dinner, when Elena took Lily to bed, he lingered at the dining room door, stiff and uncertain. Thank you," he managed, his voice strained as if someone had a hand around his throat. Elena turned back, and for the first time a ghost of amusement touched the corner of her mouth. "You sound like someone's choking you." Dominic stood there, not knowing what to do with that. It was the first time anyone had dared tease the feared Chicago Mafia boss. In the days that followed, Dominic often watched from a distance as Elena played with Lily, watching the way she smiled at the child, The way she patiently taught Lily to count. The way she held her when fear crept in. And inside him a question began to take shape. One night, after Elena had finally soothed Lily to sleep and returned to her apartment, a knock sounded at the door. She opened it and found Dominic standing there without his suit or tie, only a black shirt and slacks, looking nothing like the cold, untouchable boss she had come to know. "What do you need?" Elena asked, wary. Dominic stood for a moment as if searching for words. Then he met her eyes. And what she saw there was not arrogance or power. It was fragility. "I know you hate me," he said, his voice low and rough. "I don't deserve your help, but—" He stopped and drew a slow breath. "Lily calls you mommy. Do you know why? Because you give her something I never could. Warmth, safety, love without conditions." He looked down at his hands that had killed, that had hit her, and now looked useless. "I'm her father, but I don't know how to be a father. I only know how to command, threaten, punish. I don't know how to hold her without making her afraid. I don't know how to talk to her without sounding like I'm interrogating her." He lifted his gaze to Elena, and in his eyes she saw a man standing at the edge of something like despair. "Will you teach me?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. "Teach me how to be her father." Elena stood in the doorway, looking at the most powerful man in Chicago, standing in front of her with the face of a lost child. His question still hanging in the air, heavy and sincere enough that she didn't know how to answer it. "Teach you how to be a father," Elena repeated, skepticism plain in her voice. "You think that's something that can be taught?" Dominic didn't respond. He only stood there and waited. Elena let out a slow breath. "Come with me." She led him onto the balcony of her small apartment, where 2 wooden chairs and a little table sat facing the night. Chicago was cold but not unbearable, and the city lights glittered in the distance like an artificial sea of stars. They sat down in silence, Elena staring outward while Dominic watched her, waiting. "I can't teach you how to be a father," Elena finally said. "There isn't a formula for that, but I can tell you what Lily needs." "What?" "Presence," Elena said. "Not money, not expensive toys, not protection from the whole world, just presence. You're there when she needs you. You listen when she talks. You hold her when she's scared. That's all." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked out at the lights and his voice dropped. "I don't know how to hold anyone. No one ever taught me." Elena turned toward him and waited. "Bianca, my wife," Dominic began, speaking as if he were describing a stranger. "Our marriage was an arrangement. Her father was a business ally of my father's. They set everything up before we were even 20. No love, no choice, only duty." He paused and drew a deep breath. "Bianca didn't love me. She feared me. Living with me was like living in a gilded cage, and then she found someone else, someone she thought would save her from me." "Who?" Elena asked softly. "My enemy," Dominic said, his voice turning cold. "Marco Santini, the drug boss on the north side of Chicago. She slept with him for a full year and I didn't know. Then he was assassinated by a rival crew, and Bianca was there when it happened." Elena fell silent, not knowing what to say. "I'm not grieving because I lost her," Dominic said, his voice lower now. "I'm not even angry that she betrayed me. I'm only grieving because Lily lost her mother. She was 1 year old when Bianca died. She will never remember her mother's face." He turned and looked at Elena. "And me, I don't know how to fill that emptiness. I only know how to work, to kill, to build an empire. I don't know how to love." A long silence stretched between them. Then Elena spoke, her voice gentle but carrying a deep old ache. "I was orphaned when I was 7, she said. "My parents died in a car accident. Sophia and I were taken to St. Mary's orphanage. People said it was a good place, but—" She stopped and swallowed. "The matron was a cruel woman. She beat us for anything, sometimes for no reason at all. I was beaten for eating too slowly, for sleeping too late, for looking at her the wrong way, and worst of all, when something went missing, she always blamed me." Her voice shook slightly. "I got used to being framed, used to no one believing me, used to being punished for crimes I didn't commit. I thought once I grew up and left that place, things would be different." She turned to Dominic, her eyes deep and painful. "But then you happened, and you did everything they did to me for 20 years. You hit me, you locked me up, you accused me, you threw me in jail for something I never did." She drew a breath, trying to keep her voice from breaking. "I'm used to being disbelieved, Mr. Corsetti, but you hurt me the most, because you didn't just refuse to believe me, you wanted to destroy me for it." Dominic sat there, silent, his eyes down on the ground. For the first time in his life, the feared Chicago Mafia boss had nothing to say. No defense, no explanation, only shame, heavy as stone, pressing on his chest. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice rough. Elena started to cut him off, but he lifted a hand. "No, please let me finish." He looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had never seen in this man, sincerity down to the bone. "I'm not apologizing because I want you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm apologizing because you deserve to hear it. You deserve to know that I, Dominic Corsetti, know I was wrong, completely wrong, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." He stood, ready to leave. "Thank you for listening, and thank you for what you're doing for Lily. I don't deserve it, but she does." He walked toward the door, but Elena's voice stopped him. "Mr. Corsetti." He turned back. Elena looked at him, and for the first time since the night by the pool, her eyes did not hold hate, not forgiveness either, not yet. But it was no longer pure hatred. Something had shifted. "Your first lesson in being a father," she said softly. "Tomorrow morning you make Lily's milk yourself, and when she finishes, you hold her. Don't say anything. Just hold her." Dominic stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right." And when he left, his footsteps were a little lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. 2 weeks passed like a dream Elena would never have dared imagine. Each morning she woke in her warm apartment, made breakfast for Lily, and carried her into the main dining room of the estate. But the difference now was that Dominic sat there too. This morning, when Elena entered with Lily in her arms, she saw Dominic already waiting at the table. In front of him was a glass of warm milk, and when Lily spotted her father, she squealed with delight. "Daddy!" Lily reached for him. And what surprised Elena was how naturally he stood to take the child, with none of the old awkwardness. He settled Lily on his lap and offered the glass. "Finish this for me," he said, gentler than Elena had ever heard him. Daddy made it himself. Elena sat across from them, watching with a strange feeling tightening and softening in her chest at the same time. Because this was no longer the cold Mafia boss she had known. This was a father trying, and she could not deny that it touched something buried in her heart. "Miss Elena, Daddy knows how to say please now," Lily bragged, milk leaving a white mustache on her lip. "He says thank you too." Elena couldn't help laughing. She glanced at Dominic and saw him looking down at his daughter with an expression caught between embarrassment and pride. "You have a good teacher," Dominic said, his eyes brushing Elena's for a heartbeat before he looked away. An engine sounded out in the courtyard. Minutes later, Mia appeared in the dining room doorway, her college backpack slung over one shoulder, her face bright. "I'm home," the 19-year-old announced as she came in, and when she saw her brother feeding Lily breakfast while Elena sat across from them, her eyes lit with unhidden joy. "Wow," Mia said, dropping into a seat beside Elena. "I leave for 2 weeks and the whole house changes. Dom is actually eating breakfast with Lily. No phone, no Marco reporting work." "Do you want me to throw you out?" Dominic asked, but his voice held none of its usual threat. Mia laughed and leaned close to whisper into Elena's ear. "What kind of magic did you do on him? I've never seen him like this." Elena didn't answer, only smiled. That afternoon another visitor came. Sophia arrived, discharged from the hospital but still moving slowly. The 22-year-old stepped into the estate timidly, eyes wide as she took it all in. "Elena, it's so huge," Sophia whispered as Elena walked her through the halls. "You really live here." Elena introduced Sophia to Mia, and the two young women became close almost instantly, as if they had known each other for years. They sat in the garden talking and laughing while Elena tended Lily nearby, and seeing her sister safe and bright again gave Elena a simple happiness she had forgotten existed. That night the rain came. Not a normal rain, but a sudden violent storm, thunder and lightning tearing open the black sky, and then the power went out, and the entire estate fell into darkness. Lily's scream ripped through it all. "Daddy, Miss Elena, I'm scared." Elena ran from her apartment toward Lily's room, heart pounding. She shoved the door open, and in the flash of lightning she saw Dominic arriving from another direction at the same moment. Together they rushed to Lily's bed. The child was curled under the blanket, sobbing. Elena sat on one side of the bed and Dominic on the other. "It's okay," Elena soothed, stroking Lily's hair. "It's just rain. Daddy and Miss Elena are here. The thunder is so loud," Lily cried, reaching out. "I'm scared. Hold me." Elena and Dominic both leaned in, and their hands met in the dark. A jolt shot through Elena when her skin touched his, and she heard Dominic's breath catch for a beat. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Lightning flared, and Elena saw Dominic's eyes in the darkness, and they were not cold anymore. Something deep and hot lived in that look, something that made her heart race. Then they both pulled back as if burned. "I'm sorry," Dominic said, his voice rough. "No, I'm sorry," Elena answered, her cheeks suddenly hot even though the room was cold. They calmed Lily in silence, one on each side of the bed, careful not to touch again. But Elena could feel his presence like a warm flame, and she knew he felt the same. When Lily finally slept, Dominic stood first. "Thank you," he said, his voice turning stiff again as if he were trying to rebuild a wall that had cracked. I'll go check the generator." He left quickly, as if he were running from something. Elena stayed by Lily's bed, her pulse still wild. She didn't understand what had just happened. No, she did understand. She just didn't want to admit it. In the days that followed, Dominic kept his distance. He still ate breakfast with Lily, and still followed Elena's lessons. But he no longer met Elena's eyes. There were no late-night conversations on the balcony, no moments where they accidentally stood too close, and Elena told herself this was good. She shouldn't feel anything for this man. He had almost ruined her life. He was a mafia boss. He was. But deep down she knew something had shifted, and she wasn't sure she could go back to how things were before. On the 5th night after the storm, a knock sounded. Elena opened the door, thinking it would be Dominic, but it was Marco, his face pale and tense. "Miss Vasquez, where is the boss?" "I don't know, what is it?" Marco didn't answer. He hurried away to find Dominic, and Elena followed, dread rising in her chest. She found them in Dominic's office, Marco speaking with a grim urgency. When Elena stepped inside, both men turned to look at her. "What is it?" Elena asked. Dominic looked at her, jaw clenched, his eyes dark as a sky before a storm. "Vincent," he said, forcing each word through his teeth. "He escaped exile, and he's coming back to Chicago." The Corsetti estate became a fortress in less than 24 hours. Dominic pulling every string he had, tripling the number of bodyguards, installing more security cameras in every corner, and ordering that no one leave the grounds without his permission, while Elena went to check on Lily's room, only to find the bed empty and the window shattered. Panic exploded in her chest. She screamed for Dominic, her voice tearing through the silent hallway. Chaos erupted. Guards swarmed the house, but the room was empty. While Dominic was barking orders to seal the perimeter, Elena's phone vibrated in her pocket. She froze, staring at the screen. A message from an unknown number, a video link. With shaking fingers, she pressed it. The screen lit up, and her heart seemed to stop. Sophia was there, tied to a chair, and next to her, tiny and trembling, was Lily. Vincent Corsetti moved into view. "Hello, Elena. Hello, brother. I have a full house tonight." He smirked, looking into the lens. "I hear the surgery went very well, but you know, hearts are fragile. All it takes is a little too much stress." He lifted a knife, letting the blade slide lightly across Sophia's arm. "You want them back?" Vincent laughed. "The heir and the sister. 2 lives. Here is the deal. Come alone. Bring no one. Do not tell my brother. If I see anyone else, they die. You come, and you take her place in this chair." Then he gave an address to an abandoned warehouse on the southern outskirts of Chicago. "You have 2 hours. If I see anyone other than you, the girl dies. If you call the police, the girl dies. If you do not come." He lifted the knife to Sophia's throat. "You understand." The video ended, leaving Elena standing frozen in the room, her phone nearly slipping from her hand, unable to breathe, unable to think, seeing only Sophia's tear-soaked face, the red mark on her arm, the knife at her throat, and she had to go. She had to save her. So without another thought, Elena bolted from the room and ran down the stairs. She would call a cab. She would go to that address. She would trade her life for her sister's. She did not care what happened to her because Sophia was all she had. But as she reached the front door, a hand clamped around her arm and yanked her back. "Where are you going?" Dominic stood there, his eyes sharp and cold yet threaded with worry, and Elena fought him. "Let me go." But he did not release her, and she sobbed through the panic. "I have to go. He took Sophia. He's going to kill her." And Dominic said low and steady, "I know. Marco traced your phone signal. We saw the video." And Elena screamed again, tears spilling without control. "Then let me go. I have to get there. He said if I don't come, he'll kill Sophia." And Dominic's face was white as a sheet, his hands shaking for the first time. "He has Lily," he whispered, a sound of pure devastation. He managed to take Lily. Then his voice hardened into something terrifying. "We are going. I will burn this city to the ground to get them back." He grabbed Elena's shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Vincent has no intention of letting your sister go. He'll kill you, then kill her, then send the video to me. That's his real plan." And Elena shattered against him, pounding his chest. "I don't care. That's my sister. The only person I have in this world. I can't let her die. I'd rather die in her place." And Dominic stood there and took every blow, not dodging, not striking back, letting her hit him until she collapsed into sobs. And then he lowered himself to her eye level, his hands holding her shoulders with a gentleness that was firm, and his voice was deeper and warmer than she had ever heard from him. "Listen to me. I will not let you die, and I will not let your sister die. I promise." And she cried, broken. "What can you promise? You don't understand. Sophia is the only one I have. If she dies, I have nothing." And Dominic looked straight into her eyes, and whatever she saw there stopped her tears mid-breath. "Not anymore," he said, solid as an oath. "You have us. You have Lily. You have Mia. You have me. You are not alone anymore. Elena and I will not let anyone take anyone from you." And it was the first time he had said her name. Not Miss Vasquez, not ma'am, but Elena. And the way he said it, as if it were the most precious thing left on earth, made her throat tighten. Then Dominic rose and turned to Marco waiting at the door, the old authority sliding back into his voice. "Mobilize everything. Find Vincent. Surround the warehouse. I want no rat slipping out." And Marco asked, "How does the boss want him handled?" And Dominic stared out the window, jaw clenched, eyes dark as storm night. "I want him alive," he said, each word ground through his teeth, "so I can kill him myself." The black convoy tore through the Chicago night like hunting beasts. 5 sport utility vehicles, 20 of the Corsetti Empire's most battle-tested gunmen, and 1 Mafia boss with murder in his eyes. Marco at the wheel of the lead car with Dominic beside him, his face carved from cold stone while his gaze burned with hatred. And in the back seat, despite every objection, Elena sat with the pistol Dominic had taught her to use over the past week. "You should not be coming," Dominic said for the 3rd time since they got in. "It is too dangerous." "My sister is in there," Elena answered, her voice hard as steel. "You cannot stop me." Dominic said nothing after that, because he understood that stubbornness. He would have done the same if Lily were the one being held. The abandoned warehouse lay on the southern outskirts of Chicago, in an old industrial zone dead for decades, surrounded by collapsed buildings, weeds grown as high as a person's head, and darkness thick as ink, the perfect place to hide a hostage. The convoy stopped about 300 meters away. Dominic signaled his men to fan out and seal the area from every direction. Then he looked at Elena, his voice dropping. "Stay in the car. Wait until we control the situation." Elena was about to argue, but something in Dominic's eyes made her stop. Not an order this time, but a plea. "Please," he said, for the first time using the word with her, as if it belonged naturally in his mouth. "I cannot focus if I have to worry about you." Elena nodded even though everything inside her was boiling. Dominic and Marco led the entry team, moving through the dark like ghosts, approaching from the rear where a rusted steel door waited, Marco signaling as 2 gunmen stepped forward to break the lock, the door opening with a shriek of metal, and then hell began. Gunfire ripped the night apart. Vincent's men were waiting inside and the shootout exploded instantly, bullets slicing through air, screams, shattering glass, metal slamming into metal, Dominic moving like a panther, swift and lethal, dropping 2 men before they could even react, and then driving deeper into the warehouse, Marco covering the rear with 3 more shooters clearing the way. Inside, the warehouse was black as pitch, lit only by a few weak oil lamps that trembled and threw sickly light. Dominic pushing forward, eyes scanning every pocket of shadow, gun ready, and then he saw her. 2 chairs sat in the middle of the space, Sophia and Lily, bound back to back. Lily was crying silently, terrified. Dominic rushed to his daughter, while Elena sprinted to Sophia, hands tied, mouth sealed with tape, eyes wide with terror. When she saw him, Dominic rushing to her, dropping to his knees to cut the ropes. "You are safe," he said fast, tearing the tape from her mouth. "Where is Elena? Is she okay?" Sophia gasped. "She is outside. She is fine. Can you stand?" Sophia nodded and tried to rise on shaking legs, Dominic steadying her, turning to get her out, and that was when he heard footsteps behind him and felt the cold press of a gun barrel against the back of his head. "Hello, big brother," Vincent's voice came, cold and delighted. It has been a long time. Dominic went still, one hand still supporting Sophia, not daring to move because at this range Vincent could not miss. Let the girl go, Vincent ordered. Turn around slowly, and if you even think about trying something, I will fire. Dominic eased Sophia from his grip and turned to face his brother. Vincent stood there, paler than the last time they met, his wrist still wrapped from the wound Marco had put in it, but the gun in his hand was steady, aimed at Dominic's head without a tremor. In the end I win, Vincent laughed, wild and unhinged. You thought you could exile me, erase me, and I would disappear. You thought I would run like a kicked dog. He stepped closer, the muzzle driving into Dominic's forehead. I have waited for this moment for 38 years, the moment I see you on your knees at my feet, begging for your life, and then you will watch me put a bullet in your daughter. No heir, no legacy, just you, dying with nothing. You will not leave here alive, Dominic said, his voice ice cold. My men have this place surrounded. I know, Vincent said, but I do not need to leave. I only need to watch you die first. He cocked the gun, a sharp click in the suffocating quiet. Goodbye, big brother. Drop the gun. A voice spoke from behind, and Vincent froze. He turned his head, and what he saw stopped him cold. Elena stood there less than 5 meters away, her pistol aimed straight at his head, and she did not know when she had run in, did not know how she had made it through the firefight outside. She only knew that when she heard Vincent say goodbye, her legs had moved on their own. You, Vincent sneered. What are you going to do? Shoot me. I said, drop the gun, Elena repeated, her voice shaking while her hand stayed steady as rock, because Dominic had taught her how to hold it, how to aim, how to control her breathing, how to squeeze the trigger. If you do not, I will shoot. Vincent stared at her, then laughed, contempt thick in it, mocking and cruel. You will not shoot, he said. You are the good one. Remember, you are the girl who jumped into the pool to save a child. You are the girl who forgave the man who almost ruined your life. You do not have it in you to kill. He turned back to Dominic, pointing the gun at him again, treating Elena like she was nothing. Stand there and watch. Watch me kill my brother. Then I will kill you, kill your sister, kill everyone you love. Elena, run, Dominic shouted. But Elena did not run. She remembered the nights in jail, the fists of other inmates, the tear-soaked face of Sophia in that video. She remembered everything Vincent had done, not only to her but to Lily, to Dominic, to all of them, and she was not a good person. She was someone who would do anything to protect the people she loved. Elena squeezed the trigger. The gunshot exploded through the warehouse like thunder. The bullet tore into Vincent's right shoulder, knocking him backward, the pistol flying from his hand. Blood sprayed, dark and wet against the gray concrete. Vincent screamed and hit the floor hard. One hand clamped over the wound as he gritted out, You bitch!" and tried to crawl toward the gun where it had skidded, but Dominic was faster. He surged forward, kicked the weapon farther away, then planted his boot between Vincent's shoulder blades and drove him down. Don't move, Dominic snarled, his voice the sound of a storm. Elena stood there with her pistol still aimed forward, her whole body trembling like a leaf in high wind, unable to believe what she had just done. Because she had shot someone, she had actually shot someone, and the world felt unreal around the edges. In the distance, sirens began to wail, growing louder as they closed in. Marco had called the police the moment the firefight started, partly to make sure Vincent would be taken by the law this time, with no chance of slipping away like before. Minutes later, the warehouse flooded with the red and blue wash of patrol lights. Dozens of officers poured inside with weapons drawn, sealing off the area, and at the front of them was a familiar face. Detective Sarah Mitchell stepped into the warehouse, her sharp eyes taking in the scene in a single sweep. Vincent on the floor bleeding from the shoulder, Dominic standing over him, Elena shaking with a gun in her hands. Put the weapon down, Miss Vasquez, Mitchell said, calm but firm. Slowly. No one is going to shoot you. Elena moved like she was sleepwalking, lowering the pistol, and an officer came to take it from her while others snapped cuffs on Vincent and lifted him onto a stretcher. We need an ambulance, someone shouted. 2 injured. Sophia was brought out on another stretcher. She was conscious, only suffering a few shallow cuts and dehydration from being held too long. And when her stretcher passed Elena, she reached out and grabbed her sister's hand. Elena, Sophia cried, her voice thin and shaking. You saved me. Elena dropped to her knees beside her, tears pouring. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? I'm okay, Sophia whispered. I was just scared. But you came. You always come." They wheeled Sophia toward the ambulance, and Elena tried to follow, but Mitchell stopped her. "Miss Vasquez, I need to speak with you for a moment." Elena's heart tightened. She had shot a man. Even if it was defense, even if it was to save someone, she could still be charged. She could be sent back to jail. But what Mitchell said next made Elena go still. With Rachel Dawson's statement and the new evidence of Vincent Corsetti's plot, Mitchell said, her tone formal, "I'm glad to tell you that all previous charges against you have been fully dismissed. Your record will be cleared. As for tonight, you acted within lawful self-defense in protection of another life. No charges will be filed." Elena stood there, unable to believe she had heard it. Cleared, clean. The nightmare that had dragged across the last months of her life had finally ended. Mitchell gave her a curt nod and turned away to direct the other officers. Around Elena, people rushed in every direction, the ambulance pulling out, officers collecting evidence, medics bandaging the wounded, but Elena could not move. She stood in the middle of the chaos as if her feet had been nailed to the floor. And then, as the adrenaline drained out of her body, everything crashed in at once. She began to shake. Her whole body shook uncontrollably, as if live current were running through her bones. Her knees buckled and she folded down into the mess of noise and light. "I shot someone," she whispered, her voice breaking into fragments. "I shot someone." Tears streamed down her face, not the tears of relief but the tears of shock, of horror, of realizing she had crossed a line she never believed she could cross. And then strong hands lifted her, pulling her into a warm, steady embrace. "Dominic, it's okay," he said, his voice low and warm in her ear. "You're okay. You did the right thing. I shot. You saved me." Dominic cut in, his arms tightening around her. "You saved Sophia. You stopped him from killing all of us. You have nothing to regret." Elena cried into his chest, her hands gripping his shirt as if she might fall without it, and Dominic held her there in the middle of the chaos, not caring about the looks from the officers around them, not caring about anything except the woman coming apart in his arms. This was not an embrace of simple gratitude, not an embrace of ordinary comfort. This was the embrace of two people who had walked through hell and survived, the embrace of two people who needed each other more than anything else in the world. They stood like that for what felt like forever, until the noise around them softened, until Elena's tears began to run dry, until her heartbeat finally started to steady again. Then Dominic bent close, his mouth near her ear, and he whispered, rough with feeling, "Don't leave. I need you." Elena did not answer. She didn't know what words could hold everything between them, the grief, the harm, the wounds, the forgiveness still unfinished. But she did not let go either. She tightened her grip on his shirt, rested her head against his chest, and let herself be held for the first time in a very, very long time. A week had passed since the nightmare at the warehouse. Vincent was in custody now, awaiting trial on a long list of charges: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, even assault against a child, and this time he would not slip away. Sophia was recovering well and, at Mia's invitation, had moved in temporarily at the Corsetti estate. Lily's clear little laughter had returned, the nightmares fading night by night. Everything seemed to be settling back into something like normal, and yet between Dominic and Elena the air had changed completely. They no longer avoided each other the way they once had, but they also did not dare step too close. And every time their eyes met, they both looked away too quickly, the memory of that embrace still branded into them like a burn that would not fade. Elena knew she could not stay. She had thought about it for nights on end, lying awake in the warm apartment, staring at the ceiling and asking herself what she was doing. She loved Lily. There was no denying that, and she had begun to feel something for Dominic too, even if she did not want to admit it. But his world was not her world, guns and violence and enemies hiding in the dark, and she could not live like that for the rest of her life. That morning Elena packed. Not much, only a small suitcase with a few changes of clothes and the handful of keepsakes she owned. She had told Sophia her decision, and even though her sister did not agree, Elena would not bend. She wrote Lily a letter, explaining that Miss Elena had to go but would always love her, because she did not know if she had the courage to say goodbye face to face. She had barely stepped out of her apartment when Dominic was there, as if he had been waiting. "Where are you going?" he asked, his eyes dropping to the suitcase in her hand. Elena took a deep breath. "I'm leaving, Mr. Corsetti. I left my resignation on the table." "Why?" "Because I don't belong in your world," Elena said, forcing her voice steady even as her heart hammered out of control. "I'm an ordinary woman. I want an ordinary life. No guns, no enemies, no fear that tomorrow someone will try to kill the people I love again. She held his gaze. You've repaid me enough. Sophia is alive. My name is cleared. We're even. She stepped past him, but Dominic's voice stopped her. Elena. She turned back, and what she saw pinned her in place. Dominic Corsetti, the feared Chicago Mafia boss no one dared look in the eye, was down on his knees in front of her, kneeling in the hallway, in front of a woman who had once been nothing more than a maid in his house. What are you doing? Elena gasped, panicked. Get up, if someone sees you. I don't care who sees, Dominic said, looking up at her with a sincerity she had never seen in anyone. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did to you is unforgivable. I hit you. I locked you up. I almost destroyed your life because of my blindness and my pride. He paused and drew a breath as if he had to gather courage to go on. But you changed me. You taught me how to be a father. You gave Lily what I never could. You saved my life when I didn't deserve saving. And every day I'm near you, I become a better man. He took her hand, that rough, calloused hand of a man who had killed now trembling like a child's. Please give me a chance to make it right. Not once, not for a year, but for the rest of my life. I want to spend my life making it up to you, proving I can become the kind of man who deserves you. Elena stood there as tears rose in spite of her, looking down at the man on his knees, and inside her two forces battled fiercely. One was the past, the bruises, the jail nights, the fear and humiliation, and the other was the present, that honest look, the warmth of his arms that night at the warehouse, the feeling of being needed, of being loved, of being valued. Sister, Sophia's voice came from behind. Elena turned and saw her standing with Mia, both of them watching with hope in their eyes. You deserve to be happy, Sophia said. You spent your whole life sacrificing for me. Now it's time you live for yourself. Miss Elena, Mia added, her voice sincere. My brother isn't perfect. He's done a lot of wrong. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. You changed him. Please give him a chance. Elena looked down at Dominic, still kneeling there, his eyes holding all the vulnerability he had never allowed anyone else to see, and she spoke slowly, her voice trembling. If I stay, I have one condition. Anything. You have to give up violence, Elena said. Firm now. No more killing. No more gang wars. No more things that put this family in danger. You have to turn this empire into legal business. I don't want to live with the fear that one day Lily will lose her father, or that I will lose. She stopped before she could finish, but Dominic understood. For you, I will do anything, he said without hesitation. I will change everything. I will rebuild from the ground up. I will become the man you and Lily deserve. Elena searched his eyes for deception, for any reason to refuse, and found none. Only truth, only longing, only a love she never believed she would receive. She let the suitcase slip from her hand. Get up, she whispered, choked with tears. Dominic rose, taller than her by nearly a head, yet in that moment he looked like a man being saved. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek, his fingers trembling. Thank you, he breathed, and then he leaned down and their mouths met. The first kiss, gentle and sweet and full of everything they could not say. Elena closed her eyes and let herself fall into it, letting the past fade, letting the pain loosen, leaving only the present and the man holding her. Daddy, Miss Elena. Lily's joyful shriek rang out, and they broke apart, turning to see the little girl running toward them, tiny feet flying over the wooden floor, throwing herself against both of their legs and looking up with the brightest smile Elena had ever seen. We're a family now, right? She asked, big eyes shining. Daddy and Miss Elena love each other, and we're going to stay together forever, right? Elena looked down at the child, then looked at Dominic, and for the first time in her life she felt like she belonged somewhere. Yes, sweetheart, she said, her voice thick with feeling. We're a family now. 18 months later, the Corsetti estate was no longer the cold fortress of Chicago's infamous Mafia boss. Its ashen walls repainted a warm cream, fresh flowers blooming in the garden, where barbed wire fences and dense security cameras once dominated, and the bright laughter of children echoing through the hallways, chasing away the gloom that had hung over the place for years. Dominic Corsetti had kept his promise. 80% of his empire converted into legitimate business, from real estate to a chain of high-end restaurants and technology investment projects, with the remainder in the midst of restructuring. Marco was still his right hand, but now, instead of holding a gun, he held folders and managed business projects. Chicago's underworld whispered about the transformation of Boss Corsetti, but no one dared say it to his face, some calling him weak, until they fell silent the moment they realized. Dominic still had more than enough power to protect his family. He simply no longer wanted to use violence. Today was the most special day of Elena Vasquez's life. She stood before the mirror in a pure white wedding gown, simple yet elegant, chosen by Mia herself, her black hair pinned up and dotted with a few small white blossoms, no expensive jewelry, only the cheap bracelet Sophia had given her years ago, the bracelet Elena had believed lost forever when she was thrown into jail. Sophia stood beside her with tears in her eyes. "You're so beautiful," she said, voice thick with emotion. "If Mom and Dad could see you now, they would be so proud." Elena hugged her sister, feeling Sophia's healthy heart beating steadily beneath her blouse, remembering how, 1 year earlier, she thought she would lose her. And now Sophia stood here beautiful and full of life, cheeks blushing whenever she mentioned Dr. David, the man who had operated to save her and who was now dating her. The wedding ceremony was held in the back garden, beneath the old oak tree Lily loved, with no hundreds of guests, no press, no show, only family and the closest people. Marco stood beside Dominic as best man. Mia served as Elena's maid of honor. Sophia sat in the front row, fingers tightly laced with Dr. David's hand, and Lily, 4 years old in a fluffy pink dress, scattered petals along the aisle. When Elena stepped out from the back door, Dominic waited at the end of the path and forgot how to breathe, because the woman walking toward him was no longer the muddy, shivering maid from that night in the rain, no longer the battered girl in a county jail. This was his Elena, radiant and strong, the woman who saved his daughter, saved his soul, and changed everything he thought he knew about himself. Their vows were spoken beneath birdsong and a gentle breeze, and when Dominic kissed his bride, Lily jumped and cheered. "Mommy! Daddy kissed Mommy! Mommy!" The name Lily had been calling Elena for 3 months now, ever since she naturally changed what she called her without anyone telling her to, and Elena cried all night that night. But they were tears of happiness. The reception after the ceremony was intimate and filled with laughter. Mia gave a moving speech about the woman who changed her brother and brought happiness to the whole family, the 20-year-old newly graduated from law school with top honors, declaring she would devote her career to protecting the vulnerable, people like Elena who had once been treated unjustly with no one standing on their side. In the middle of the celebration, Elena rose and tapped her glass lightly to draw everyone's attention. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, looking at Dominic, then down at Lily sitting on her father's lap. "Lily, you're going to have a baby brother or sister." The entire garden erupted in cheers. Lily scrambled down, ran to wrap her arms around Elena's belly, squealing, "A baby! A baby! I'm going to have a baby!" Dominic stood stunned for a moment, then lunged forward to hold his wife, his eyes wet, and for the first time in his life he did not try to hide his tears in front of anyone. "Thank you," he whispered into Elena's ear. "Thank you for everything." That evening, after the guests had gone and Lily slept soundly after a long day, Elena walked alone into the back garden and stopped by the garden path, near where the old bins used to stand. The area was now filled with blooming hydrangeas, no longer the cold, dark corner it had been on that fateful night 1 year ago. She remembered the instant she lifted the lid, remembered the terrifying silence of the child curled among the refuse, remembered the child's weak heartbeat beneath her hands as she pressed on her chest and begged life to return. She also remembered Dominic's slap, the night in the basement, the 2 weeks of hell in jail, and strangely, those painful memories no longer hurt her now. They were simply part of the road that brought her here, to the family she never dared dream she could have. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, Dominic's familiar warmth covering her like a blanket. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about that night," Elena answered. "The night I saved Lily. You changed everything," Dominic said, voice low and full of gratitude. "Without you, I would still be that monster, living in darkness and not knowing what love is." Elena turned in his arms and looked up at the man who had gone from enemy to husband. "No," she smiled. "I just did the right thing. I saw a child who needed saving, and I saved her. I didn't think about consequences or rewards. I only did what my heart told me." She placed a hand on her belly, where a small life was growing day by day, and life gave me a reward bigger than anything I ever dared to imagine. Dominic kissed her forehead, then her lips, then knelt to kiss her belly. "Daddy loves you," he whispered to the unborn baby. "Daddy loves your mother, and Daddy will spend his whole life protecting this family. From the house, Lily's voice rang out. Mommy, Daddy, I'm awake. I want a story. And Elena and Dominic looked at each other and laughed. The princess is calling, Elena said. Let's go, Dominic answered, taking his wife's hand and leading her back toward the warmly lit house. And as they walked, the garden lights glittered under the moon as if it were smiling, blessing this small family overflowing with love. Sometimes, the people the world throws away are the ones with the greatest hearts. Elena did not save Lily to be repaid. She saved her because it was what she had always wished someone would do for her when she was small, when she was a lonely orphan in a cold children's home, and in the end, after all the pain and trials, she found the family she had deserved for a long time. This story teaches us that kindness is never wasted. Even when doing the right thing brings temporary suffering, the universe will find a way to repay a compassionate heart. It also reminds us that people can change. Dominic was once cruel and blind, but Elena's love and patience helped him reclaim the humanity he had lost. And most of all, the story shows that family is not always the people who share your blood. Family is the people who choose to love one another, protect one another, and stand together through every storm. My dear friends, this is where the story ends. Thank you for staying with Elena and Dominic through this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please press the like button and subscribe to our channel so you do not miss the compelling stories we share every day. Please share this video with the people you love, the people who need to be reminded that life always offers a second chance to those who deserve it. We would truly love to hear what you feel, from the deepest place in your heart. What do you think about this story? Have you ever faced a moment in life that forced you to struggle between doing the right thing and protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every comment and we value every one of your opinions. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days. Keep your faith in kindness, because sometimes one small act can change an entire life. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.